The penthouse on the 72nd floor of the Lotte World Tower smelled like gardenias and gun oil. Imani Whitfield stood barefoot on imported walnut floors, her champagne silk dress torn at the shoulder, blood drying along her collarbone that wasn't hers. Behind her, Seoul glittered like a bowl of broken glass, the Han River cutting through the city like a black ribbon. In front of her, 3 men lay motionless on the marble, and the fourth, the one who had flown 6,000 miles from Atlanta to drag her bag, was kneeling with a Glock pressed against the back of his skull. The man holding the gun was Min-jae Cho, 34 years old, 6'2", CEO of Cho Holdings on paper. On every other piece of paper that mattered in the underworld, he was the head of the Beko Syndicate, the White Tiger, and the most feared man in 3 provinces. He hadn't blinked in 4 minutes. "Imani." His voice was so calm it sounded like a lullaby. "You decide, not me. You." Her stepbrother Darius looked up at her with the same eyes that used to laugh at her over cold grits at their mother's kitchen table. The same eyes that had signed her name on a $340,000 loan she never took out. The same eyes that had called her useless, broke, embarrassing just last December. "Imani, baby sis," Darius whispered. You wouldn't do me like this." She looked at Min-jae, then at the man who shared her last name, then at the city that, 11 months ago, she didn't even know how to pronounce. Her hand stopped shaking. But to understand how Imani Whitfield ended up here, barefoot, blood-streaked, choosing, we need to go back to a folding chair in a Marietta, Georgia kitchen, where a woman who had given everything was being told, one more time, that she still wasn't enough. If you've ever bent yourself into a pretzel for a family that called your sacrifices the bare minimum, if you've ever wired money you didn't have to people who wouldn't lend you a stamp, if you've ever been the daughter, the sister, the cousin, the cash machine, this story is for you. This is the story of a woman everyone wrote off as the family disappointment, until a man from a world she couldn't pronounce looked at her ledger of pain and said, "That's not debt, that's collateral." Before we go further, do me one favor. Hit that subscribe button and drop the word worth in the comments, because this story is going to ask you one question, and I want you to answer it honestly by the end. What is the actual price tag on your piece? Stay with me. It gets darker before it gets gold. 11 months before the penthouse, Imani Whitfield was 31 years old, living in a 600-square-foot studio above a Cuban bakery in East Point, Georgia, and working 2 jobs that didn't add up to one life. By day, she was a junior translator at Hanwari Logistics, an unglamorous Korean shipping firm tucked behind a strip mall on Buford Highway. She'd taught herself the language during the long, sleepless year her mother spent in chemotherapy, watching K-dramas on mute with subtitles, then with subtitles off, then talking back to the screen in clipped, careful Hangul. By the time her mother went into remission, Imani could read shipping manifests in 2 languages and negotiate with a Busan dockmaster without losing her temper. By night, she drove for a rideshare app from 9 until 2 in the morning, 4 nights a week, in a 2014 Hyundai Elantra with 187,000 miles on it and a check engine light she'd learned to ignore. The money wasn't for her. Her stepfather, Reginald, had a bad back from 30 years of laying tile, and her mother's medical debt from the cancer years was still hanging over the house in Marietta like weather. Her stepbrother, Darius, was 36, ran a logistics consulting firm that had no clients she could name, and lived in a 4-bedroom rental in Smyrna with his girlfriend Tasha and a cane Corso named Brig. He drove a leased Cadillac. He posted gym selfies. He owed Imani $14,800 across 9 separate Cash App requests, none of which he acknowledged. Every Sunday, Imani drove to Marietta with a bag of groceries and an envelope of cash. Every Sunday, her mother Lorraine kissed her cheek and said, "Thank you, baby." And every Sunday, before Imani could even take her coat off, Darius would walk in, eat the food she'd brought, and tell the table some new story about how Imani needed to grow up and stop playing translator for chinks. Lorraine would laugh. Reginald would laugh. Imani would look at her plate. The lie she had been told her whole life, the one she still half believed at 31, was that love was a debt and she had been born owing. Her biological father had walked out when she was 4. Reginald had stepped in, and Lorraine had reminded her, gently and often, that not every man would raise another man's child. Be grateful, be useful, be quiet. So she was. She paid Darius's portion of their mother's Medicare supplement when he forgot. She co-signed a car loan he defaulted on, which dropped her credit score 140 points. She lent him $4,200 for a business opportunity that turned out to be a sneaker reseller scam, and when she asked about it, he called her stingy and didn't speak to her for 2 months. In November, Lorraine sat her down at the kitchen table on a folding chair because the dining chairs were for company and said, "Baby, Darius is going through something. He needs another $6,000 by Friday. I told him you'd handle it." "You're the strong one." Imani had $814 in her checking account. Rent was due in 11 days. She said yes. She drove home that night with her jaw locked so tight she chipped a molar. At a red light on Cleveland Avenue, she looked at herself in the rearview mirror and didn't recognize the woman looking back. Hollow-cheeked, 31 going on 50, hair pulled back so tight her edges were thinning, eyes the color of strong tea and twice as bitter. She whispered to no one, "I can't keep being this." She didn't know it yet, but 4 blocks away, a black Maybach was sitting outside her bakery building, and the man in the back seat was holding a manila folder with her name on it. The man waiting for her wasn't waiting for her, not exactly. He was waiting for the courier she'd unknowingly become. 3 weeks earlier, Imani's supervisor at Hanwari, a tired man named Mr. Pak, had asked her to personally hand-deliver a sealed envelope to an important client on Friday evening at the Intercontinental Buckhead. Time and a half, no questions. She'd said yes because she needed the $186 to cover a utility bill Darius had promised to pay and hadn't. She had not known that the envelope contained the routing information for a $2.4 million wire from a shell company in Incheon to a holding account in the Caymans. She had not known that Hanwari Logistics was a clean-skinned subsidiary of a much older, much darker tree, and she had not known that the important client was the man who owned the whole forest. His name was Min-jae Cho. He was sitting in the bar of the Intercontinental wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than her car, drinking sparkling water with 3 ice cubes, and reading a worn paperback copy of Beloved in English. When she walked in, hair frizzed from the December humidity, her one good blouse 2 seasons out of style, he closed the book and looked at her the way a jeweler looks at a stone that's been mistaken, all its life, for glass. She handed him the envelope. He didn't open it. He said in unaccented English, "Sit down, Ms. Whitfield, please." She didn't sit. "I have to get back," she said. "To driving strangers around a city that's about to be unkind to you?" He gestured at the empty chair. 5 minutes. I'll pay you for 10. He slid a black card across the table. On it, in silver, CHO, MJ, and a phone number. Nothing else. "I run a company," he said. "Several, actually. One of them owns Hanwari. I read all internal correspondence from my translation desks. I read yours." She felt her stomach drop. "I haven't done anything." "I know, that's the problem." He folded his hands. They were elegant, scarred across 2 knuckles in a way that suggested old fights, not old fistfights. 6 weeks ago, you flagged a shipment from Yosu as inconsistent with its declared contents. You wrote a 4-line note in Korean to Mr. Pak. He buried it. I unburied it. You were right. That shipment cost a competitor of mine $41 million won in customs fees because of you. Her mouth was dry. I didn't. You did. You also, last week, mistranslated a contract clause in our favor by what I assume was accident, and saved my legal team approximately $90,000 in arbitration costs. A small, dangerous smile. You have the most expensive mistakes I've ever seen. She finally sat down. Not because he'd asked, because her legs wouldn't hold her. What do you want from me? He studied her for a long moment. The bar was loud, but around them somehow it felt like a vacuum. I want to know, he said quietly, why a woman with your mind is wearing shoes that have been resoled twice. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Because if she opened her mouth, the thing that would come out wasn't an answer. It was a scream 11 years in the making, and she didn't trust a stranger with the sound of it. He nodded as if she'd answered anyway. "I'm going to give you my card," he said, "and a piece of information you didn't ask for. Your stepbrother Darius Whitfield. He's not who you think he is. And neither, Ms. Whitfield, is your name." She didn't call him. For 4 days, the black card sat in her glove compartment like a piece of unexploded ordnance. She went to work. She drove rideshare. She wired Darius $1,800 on Tuesday because Tasha had an emergency. She did not sleep more than 3 hours a night. On the 5th day, Friday, she came home at 2:14 in the morning to find her apartment door open and her studio destroyed. The mattress slashed, the drawers emptied, her grandmother's pearl earrings, the only thing she owned worth anything, gone. On the bathroom mirror, in red lipstick that wasn't hers, someone had written, "Stop asking." She didn't know what she was supposed to have been asking about. She called the police. They took a report. They left. She sat on the slashed mattress for an hour, fully clothed, shaking, and then she pulled the black card out of her purse. He picked up on the second ring. "Ms. Whitfield." "Someone broke into my apartment." "I know, I'm 3 minutes away." He arrived in the Maybach. He did not come inside. He had a woman with him, a tall, sharp-faced security professional named Haiwan, who introduced herself with a nod and immediately began photographing the apartment. Min-jae stood in the doorway, looking at the lipstick on the mirror without expression. "Pack a bag," he said. "I don't know you. You know enough." He turned to her. "Ms. Whitfield, Imani, your stepbrother 3 years ago took out a line of credit using your social security number, $240,000. He used it as seed capital in an investment scheme run by a man named Curtis Vaughn, who laundered the funds through what he believed was a small Korean shipping firm in Doraville. That firm was owned by a man named Sung-ho Lim. Sung-ho Lim is my rival. He has known your name longer than I have." She was sitting on the floor now. She didn't remember sitting down. "The loan defaulted 8 months ago," Min-jae continued, his voice gentler now. "Your name is on a collections list that has been sold 3 times. The current holder is Sung-ho Lim. He's been using the debt to pressure your stepbrother into running errands for him. Your stepbrother has been telling him you'll cover it. The lipstick on your mirror is a message to him, through you." "How much?" she said. Her voice was a stranger's. $341,000 after interest and fees. I make $46,000 a year. I know. I can't. I know. She started to laugh. It wasn't a good laugh. It was the laugh of a woman who had just realized that the house she'd been holding up with her bare hands had been on fire the entire time. "My mother," she said. "Does my mother know?" Min-jae was quiet for a long moment. "Your mother co-signed the original line of credit, Imani." The laughter stopped. The woman she had been driving groceries to every Sunday for 11 years. The woman who had told her, on a folding chair, that she was the strong one. Outside, a siren wailed and faded. "What do you want from me?" she whispered for the second time in 5 days. This time he came inside. He knelt down in front of her, careful of the broken glass, and he didn't touch her, didn't reach for her, didn't perform the rescue. He just said, "I want you to stop paying." He didn't take her to the penthouse that night. He took her to a serviced apartment in Midtown, paid for under a corporate name she'd never heard of, with fresh clothes in her size already in the closet and a bowl of cut Korean pears on the counter. The pears unraveled her. She sat at the kitchen island and cried for 40 minutes, the kind of crying that comes from somewhere older than the body it's leaving. Min-jae sat across from her and didn't say a single word. He didn't offer tissue. He didn't tell her it would be okay. He let her have it. When she was done, he poured her a glass of barley tea and slid it across the counter. "I'm not rescuing you," he said. She wiped her face. "Good. I don't want to be rescued." "Smart woman." He almost smiled. "Here's what I can do. I can give you tools, not money. Tools. A lawyer who specializes in identity theft and elder financial abuse. A forensic accountant who can trace every dollar your stepbrother moved through your name. Protection while it's needed. And a job,"
A real one, at 12 times what Hanwari pays you, running the English language operations of one of my holding companies, because you are, objectively, wasted at a translation desk. And in exchange? He looked at her steadily. In exchange, you become a problem for Sung-ho Lim. You file the police report. You testify in civil court. You become public, Imani. Loud, documented. Sung-ho operates in the dark. The minute your name is in 3 newspapers, the debt he's holding becomes radioactive, and he has to drop it or expose himself. So I'm bait. You're a witness. The difference matters. She studied him. Up close, in the soft kitchen light, he looked younger than he'd seemed at the hotel. There was a thin scar through his right eyebrow. His cuffs were rolled twice, neatly, and his forearms were corded with the kind of muscle that came from doing, not posing. What's the risk? She asked. Honest answer? Your mother goes to prison, possibly. Your stepbrother, definitely. You may lose your relationship with both, permanently. Sung-ho may try at least once to hurt you, though I will make that difficult. Your name will be in places you didn't choose. The Imani Whitfield who walks out of this is not the Imani Whitfield who walked in. I cannot give her back to you. I won't pretend I can. She breathed in, breathed out. And you? She asked. What's in this for you? Don't lie. He nodded, like he'd been waiting for the question. Sung-ho Lim killed my older brother 8 years ago, made it look like a car accident on the road to Gangneung. I've spent every day since then building a case the Korean police can't ignore, in 3 countries and 4 languages. You are, accidentally, the cleanest American witness to one of his financial operations I have ever encountered. Helping you helps me. I won't dress it up. She liked him better for not dressing it up. One more thing, she said. If I do this, if I become your problem for Sung-ho, I am not your asset. I'm not your employee in any way that means you own me. I work for you. I don't belong to you. He held her eyes. Ms. Whitfield, I have never wanted to own you. I want to watch you stop being owned. It was the most honest sentence anyone had said to her in a decade. She picked up the barley tea. Her hand was steady for the first time all night. Then write the contract, she said, and use my full name, Imani Renee Whitfield. Spell the Renee right. The lawyer's name was Adaeze Okonkwo. She was 43, Nigerian-American, partner at a firm in Buckhead with 3 framed federal verdicts on her wall and 0 patience for anyone's nonsense. Min-jae's company put her on retainer. Within 72 hours, Imani had filed an identity theft affidavit with the FTC, a police report with Cobb County, a civil suit against Darius Whitfield, and, the one that broke her, a notarized statement naming her own mother as a co-conspirator. She didn't sleep the night she signed that one. She sat in the service department at 3 a.m., a mug of cold tea in her hands, and she thought about the woman who had braided her hair every Sunday until she was 12, the woman who had stood beside her hospital bed when she'd had her appendix out at 16, the woman who had also, apparently, watched her bleed money for 11 years, knowing exactly where it was going. Around 4 a.m., Min-jae texted her. Awake? Yes. Roof. Bring a jacket. The building had a small rooftop terrace, glassed in against the December cold. He was already up there, in a black overcoat, looking out at the skyline. My mother used to make me bring her tea, he said without turning, every morning. From the time I was 6 until I left for university. She said it was so I would learn that even powerful men serve someone. She stood beside him. Is she still alive? No. She died when I was 22. My brother 7 years later. He turned to her. You are about to lose your mother too, Imani. Not to death, to truth. They are not the same loss, but they cost the same. She didn't answer. She just stood there, watching the city, and after a long moment, he took off his overcoat and put it around her shoulders. He didn't touch her. He just put the coat there, like setting down a heavy thing. The next morning, Darius was arrested in the parking lot of his gym. He called her 23 times from county lockup. She didn't answer. On the 24th call, Tasha called instead, screaming, calling her a snake, a sellout, a Korean-loving traitor to her own blood. Imani let it go to voicemail, and then she blocked the number. Her mother called next. She let that one ring. It rang for 4 days. On the 5th day, she answered. Lorraine cried, said she'd been forced, said Darius had threatened her, said Imani didn't understand what it was like to be a mother, to protect her son. "Mama," Imani said, "I sent you $4,000 in October for your blood pressure medication. You spent it on Darius's car payment. I saw the receipts. Adiz got the receipts." Silence. "Imani, baby, please, please don't do this to me. I'm not doing anything to you, Mama. I'm doing something for me, for the first time." She hung up. She didn't cry. That, more than anything, scared her, that she had nothing left to cry with. Quick pause, family. If this story is hitting you somewhere real, do me a favor and type "I felt that" in the comments. There's a reason this resonates. Keep going. Sung-ho Lim's people made their move on a Tuesday. 2 men followed her from the parking garage at her new office. Cho Holdings English Operations Division, 22nd floor, salary $312,000, to a coffee shop on Peachtree, and one of them slid into the booth across from her while the other stood by the door. "You're a smart woman, Miss Whitfield," the one in the booth said. He had a Brooklyn accent and a gold cross around his neck. "Smart women know when to be quiet." She took a slow sip of her oat milk latte. "Smart women," she said, "also know when to record." She tilted her phone, screen up on the table. The red dot was blinking. "I've been recording since you sat down. My lawyer's number is the last one I dialed. If you'd like to repeat what you just said, slower, I'd appreciate it." His jaw worked. She held his eyes. He left. She sat there for another 40 minutes, finishing her latte, hand shaking only on the inside, and she texted Min-jae one word: "Done." He texted back, "I know. I'm proud of you." She read it 3 times before she put her phone away. The civil trial against Darius Whitfield, with Lorraine Whitfield Banks named as co-defendant, started on a damp Tuesday in March in Fulton County Superior Court. Imani wore a navy suit Adiz had picked out for her, hair pulled back into a low bun, no jewelry except small gold studs that had been her grandmother's. She testified for 2 hours and 40 minutes. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She read from her ledger of Cash App receipts and bank statements and text messages and Darius's own social media posts, and she let the numbers do what numbers do. Darius's attorney tried to paint her as the bitter sister, the jealous one, the one who couldn't stand to see her brother succeed. Adiz, on redirect, asked her one question. "Ms. Whitfield, in the 11 years your stepbrother has been borrowing money from you, what is the largest amount he has ever paid back?" Imani looked at the jury. $40, she said. In 2019. For a movie ticket. He wanted credit for it. A juror in the back row, a black woman in her 50s with locks to her waist, made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sigh, and Imani felt the room turn. The verdict came back in 94 minutes. Judgment for the plaintiff. $387,000 in damages plus legal fees. Darius, separately indicted on federal wire fraud, would be sentenced in May to 84 months in federal prison. Lorraine, who took a plea, would get 3 years probation and a permanent garnishment on her Social Security. Outside the courthouse, on the steps, a local reporter pushed a microphone toward Imani's face. "Ms. Whitfield, your own family. How does it feel?" Imani looked into the camera. "It feels," she said, "like the first time in my whole life I didn't apologize for taking up space." The clip went viral within 6 hours, 11 million views by Friday. That night, in a private dining room at a quiet restaurant in Hanam-dong, they had flown to Seoul the next morning for what Min-jae called Phase 2. Sung-ho Lim, a soft-faced man in his 60s with a diamond pinky ring, sat across from Min-jae at a private table he had not been invited to, and tried to laugh it off. "Min-jae si, surely this is between businessmen. The girl is incidental." Min-jae did not look up from his soup. "Sung-ho si," he said in Korean. "Ms. Whitfield is not incidental. She is the entire point.
You leveraged her name. You sent men to her city. You wrote on her mirror. He set down his spoon. The debt you hold against her is forgiven, in writing, by midnight, or every file I have on my brother's death goes to the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's office at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Sung-ho's smile faded. You wouldn't risk. I would risk anything, Min-jae said quietly, for her name to be clean. By midnight, the debt was forgiven. By 9 a.m., Sung-ho Lim's lawyers were filing emergency motions. By the end of the week, he was under indictment on 23 counts. Imani, 6,000 miles from Marietta, read the news on her phone in a hotel suite overlooking Namsan Tower, and, for the first time in her adult life, she ate a meal slowly. She tasted it. She had seconds. She thought it was over. It wasn't. There's always one more ghost. 3 months after the trial, on a Saturday morning in Seoul, where she had begun splitting her time between Atlanta and Korea for the English ops role, her phone rang from a number she didn't recognize. It was Reginald, her stepfather, the man who had raised her. Imani, baby girl, it's me. Don't hang up. She didn't hang up. She walked to the window of her apartment in Itaewon and watched a delivery scooter weave through traffic. What do you want, Reggie? Your mama's sick, baby. Real sick. The stress of all this, the probation, the shame. She had a small stroke last week. She's home now. She's asking for you. The old machinery in Imani's chest started up automatically. The guilt, the pull, the you're the strong one. She let it run. She let it spin. And then, slowly, she turned it off. Reggie, she said, I love you. I want you to hear that because I mean it. You were a better father to me than my biological one. You taught me how to drive. You came to my graduation. I'm grateful for those things, and I will be grateful for them for the rest of my life. Baby, then come home. But you also sat at that kitchen table for 11 years and watched Mama use me like a credit line, and you laughed at Darius's jokes about my work, and you never once, not one time, said enough. So when you tell me Mama is sick and asking for me, what I hear is, she ran out of other people to ask, and you're calling on her behalf. He was quiet for a long time. That's not fair, Imani. No, she said. 11 years wasn't fair, this is just true. So what, you're not coming? I'll send a nurse. I'll pay for home care. I'll cover her medications, all of them, for as long as she needs. But I'm not coming back to that kitchen, Reggie. Not to sit on the folding chair. Not to be the strong one. Not anymore. She heard him breathe, a long, defeated breath. The breath of a man who had been counting on the old Imani and just realized she wasn't available. She raised you, he said. She used me, Imani said. Those are different verbs. She hung up. She stood at the window for a long time. The sun was rising over the mountains east of Seoul, and the city was waking up in that particular Korean way, all clatter and steam and old women sweeping their stoops. Behind her, the bedroom door opened. Min-jae, in a gray t-shirt and loose pants, his hair still rumpled from sleep, came up beside her without a word and pressed a warm mug of barley tea into her hands. She took it. She didn't cry. She just leaned her forehead against his shoulder for 30 seconds, and he stood very still. And then she straightened up and took a sip and said, "Let's get breakfast." That was the moment, she would say later, that she became unrecoverable to her old life. Not the courtroom, not the verdict. The phone call she didn't answer the way she would have a year ago. 8 months after the trial, on a cold November morning in Seoul, Imani Whitfield stood in front of a glass wall on the 58th floor of a building in Uedo and looked at her own name on a door. Imani R. Whitfield, Managing Director, International Operations, Whitfield Cho Global Logistics. It was her name first. She had insisted. The company was new, 6 months old, built from the cleaned-up bones of one of Min-jae's smaller subsidiaries, restructured under joint ownership, with Imani holding a 34% equity stake she had earned, not been given. She had brought in 3 major American shipping contracts in her first quarter. She had renegotiated a 5-year deal with a Vietnamese textile consortium that her predecessor had said was impossible.
She spoke in 3 languages in meetings, sometimes in the same sentence, and she had stopped apologizing for any of them. Her annual compensation, base plus equity vesting, was $1.2 million. She wired a chunk of her first quarterly bonus, $40,000, to a nonprofit in Atlanta that helped Black women trapped in cycles of family financial abuse get out. She did it anonymously. She didn't post about it. She didn't tell anyone except her assistant, a sharp 26-year-old from Daegu named Sua, who handled the transfer and never mentioned it again. She bought herself one thing that quarter, just for her, a pair of pearl earrings to replace the ones that had been stolen from her studio above the Cuban bakery. They weren't her grandmother's. They were better. They were hers. On the morning she signed the final incorporation papers, alone in her office, she pulled up an old photo on her phone. Herself, 31 years old, hollow-cheeked, standing in front of the Hyundai Elantra with 187,000 miles on it. She looked at that woman for a long time. "I kept my promise," she whispered. The promise being, I can't keep being this. She had kept it, not because a man had saved her, because she had stopped saving everyone else. That night, she walked home along the Han River, in a coat that fit her, in shoes that hadn't been resoled, and she stopped at a pojangmatcha tent for a paper cup of fish cake broth and stood among strangers eating standing up. An old woman beside her smiled and said something in Korean too fast and warm to catch, and Imani smiled back, and for the first time in her life, she belonged to the moment she was standing in. Min-jae proposed on no particular evening, in no particular way, 10 months after the courtroom in Atlanta. They were sitting on the floor of her apartment in Itaewon, eating cold, leftover jjajangmyeon out of the containers, the heater clicking, a documentary about deep-sea fish playing on mute on the TV. He was wearing reading glasses, which she had only recently learned he needed. She was wearing one of his old college t-shirts. He said, "I'd like to marry you." She said, "I figured." He laughed, a real laugh, the kind almost no one in his life had ever heard. And she laughed too, and then she set down her chopsticks and looked at him. "Min-jae," she said, "I love you. You know I do. But I need to say something, once, out loud, so we both know it's been said." He waited. "I am not your project," she said. "I'm not the girl you saved, and I never was. I was a woman who was drowning, and you handed me a rope, but I climbed it myself. I will not be a wife who owes you. I won't be a wife who whispers. I won't be a wife who shrinks because the man across from her is large. If you marry me, you marry a woman who will out-earn you in industries you don't even compete in someday. You marry a woman who will say no to you in front of your colleagues. You marry a woman who will leave if you ever try to fold her smaller." He took off his glasses, set them down on the floor, took her hand. The first time he had touched her hand in a way that wasn't incidental, after 11 months of restraint. "Imani," he said in Korean, then in English. "I did not fall in love with a woman I could fold. I fell in love with the one who stood up at the kitchen table on the 72nd floor and said enough." He paused. "And for what it's worth, I have my own ghosts, my brother. The choices I made to avenge him, the fact that some of my hands are not clean. You are marrying a man who has done things he will not lie to you about, but also will not undo. If you need a clean man, I am not him." "I don't need a clean man," she said. "I need an honest one." "Then yes?" "Then yes." There was no ring that night. The ring came 3 weeks later, a thin band of white gold with a single pearl, because she had told him, once, in passing, that diamonds had always felt like other people's dead. He had listened. That, she would think later, was the whole secret. He had listened. So here's the truth about Imani Renee Whitfield, the girl her family called a failure, the woman a Korean Mafia boss called his greatest fortune. She didn't get a fairy tale. She got a court date. She got a mother who never spoke to her again. She got a stepbrother in federal prison, and a stepfather who pretended she'd been dead since the morning she said no. She got nightmares for the first 2 years. She got a name in newspapers she didn't always want her name in. She got a husband whose hands were not entirely clean, and a marriage that worked because nobody in it was pretending. She also got herself back. She got the woman in the rearview mirror at the Cleveland Avenue red light, the one who whispered, "I can't keep being this." She got that woman home. She got her seated at a table she chose, in a city she chose, in a life she signed her own name to. If you've been carrying a family on a back that was never meant to hold one, if you've been told your sacrifice is the bare minimum, if you're sitting on a folding chair right now wondering if it's too late, it isn't. The folding chair is not your forever seat. You are allowed to stand up. You are allowed to walk out. You are allowed to wire the money to yourself this time. She didn't get a fairy tale ending. She got something better. She got herself back. If this story moved you, comment worth below and tell me one thing you're done paying for. Share this with the woman in your life who's been the strong one for too long. She needs to hear it tonight. And subscribe, because next week, we're telling the story of a woman who walked away from a $1 billion engagement and built something the world didn't see coming. Stand up from the folding chair. I'll see you in the next one.